Hello, my name is Mark McCoy and I'm part of Team WildFires, and we're here to discuss wildfires in the western region of the United States is a wicked problem. So first, we'd like to qualify what exactly a wicked problem is. It's got a vague problem definition. In this case, there's multiple stakeholders who are never going to agree on a specific solution or even that a problem exists. We have undefined solutions where you might have suppression versus mitigation versus adaptation. Um, some of these may work in some areas, not work in other areas. You have no endpoint because you have the three pillars of sustainability basically fighting each other. You have the economic, environmental, and social pillars, where if you do something that benefits one pillar, it may take away from another pillar or both other pillars. And also, you have cascading consequences. So until you implement a solution, you really don't know what those cascading effects may be. It's irreversible. So we're talking biodiversity loss, extinction. Once it's gone, it's gone. And also our effects on the carbon cycle. Have we already polluted so much carbon in the atmosphere that there is no turning back? Wildfire also represents a unique problem. You have the human risk versus the natural ecological cycles. There's lots of flora and plant life that depend on fire to continue their life cycle. It's urgent. Over the past 30 years, we've seen an increase in frequency, season length, and fire duration. For the purpose of this project, the scales we'll be dealing with are the spatial, which is the western region of the United States, and the temporal. Basically, we're looking at the last 30 years and 25 years into the future. If you look at the map, you can see that there's almost 2 million people in the western region of the United States that currently live in a high risk or a very high risk wildfire area. Again, for the purpose of this report, we're going to be talking about the Transformational Sustainability Research Framework, which asks four simple questions. Where are we? Where are we headed? Where do we want to go? And how are we going to get there? The primary stakeholders we've identified for this project are the government and agencies responsible for policies influencing people's behaviors towards wildfires, and also the people that are living in at-risk communities. The secondary stakeholders would include recreational users, hunters, fishermen, campers, hikers, and the tourism industry, which makes its living on people visiting these beautiful natural areas. So socially, where are we? Our norms, we consider wildfire as an adversary. We've always treated it as an enemy, something that we need to fight. We don't always believe that wildfire is an issue unless, it's burning down our backyard. If you're not directly affected, you don't always understand the impact that it has. And as far as values go, we don't really value the ecological benefit that wildfires can bring. We value more that we want to live in this beautiful property. We want to cut down the trees so we can live in the middle of them. And those attitudes aren't really sustainable. So the United States Wildlife Fire Executive Council identified three primary initiatives to try to help combat wildfires. They want to restore and maintain fire-adapted landscapes, facilitate fire-adapted communities so we can coexist with wildfires. They try to promote collaborative, informed, safe, and effective wildfire responses. This all sounds great, but the year after releasing this report, the Wildlife Fire Executive Council disbanded in 2015, and we still have an issue on a macro level. We have the jurisdictional boundaries and institutional regulations involving federal to state and state to local communities amongst these collaborating agencies. So where does that leave us now? 90% of the wildland fires in the United States last year were started by people, human interaction. Those fires burned down 4,636 structures. Over 10 million acres were burned, and the U.S. spent an estimated $2 billion to fight wildfires in 2015 alone. So now I'd like to introduce Lori Bragg, who will be discussing some of our scenarios in the future heading forward. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lori Bragg, and I will be talking to you about our group's plan regarding where we are going in the future with the problem of wildfires. We developed two contrasting scenarios. for a 25-year period based on 1. If people were to do nothing about the problem of human-wildland interface, and 2. If people were to implement solutions to reduce the overall area of human-wildland interface regions, as I outline next. Our first scenario is a negative one in that the increasing of human-wildland interface areas increases the risks of human-caused wildfires. The economic impact is the destruction of businesses, homes, and livelihoods. Politically, governments currently bear the majority of the cost burden of fire prevention, suppression, and protecting of public lands, as well as the majority of private property when wildland fires occur. As populations grow, these costs will continue to grow. On a social level, the increase of the wildfire occurrences will impact families and healthcare systems, as humans will have more health problems, related deaths, as well as an increase in the destruction of property and wildlife populations. Globally, wildfire will continue to contribute to the increase of greenhouse gases and global warming effects, and will also cause a decrease in the amount of carbon sink resources, such as trees, throughout the world. Finally, by creating an environment where the only goal is complete fire suppression in woodland areas, people will be contributing to the declining overall health of the forests and ecosystems that will allow invasive species to spread and cause additional risk of massive wildfires. Our second scenario is a more positive one, as we develop a plan to encourage a decrease in the amount of human-wildland interface areas. By making these interface lands more expensive to develop and live in, populations may decline along with the human-caused fire ignition events. This would benefit the economy by having less impact to humans, private lands, and structures when fires do happen. Additionally, by setting more adequate insurance requirements and property taxes for the human-wildland interface areas, the true costs of living in these areas can be more accurately determined and distributed to those that choose to live in the high-risk areas. Governments would benefit from a decrease in cost, and the private owners would bear a majority of the costs of fire prevention, suppression, and protecting of their own land and property from these wildfires. With a decrease in population in these areas and a possible decrease in the occurrence of wildfires, the social impact would be a decrease in the impact on healthcare systems because of a reduction of smoke, ash, property damage, and death of humans as well as wildlife. Globally, wildfires will ultimately continue to contribute to the increase in greenhouse gases and global warming effects, but potentially at a much slower rate of accumulation of fires. With this decrease in humans in the higher risk fire areas, wildfires can be allowed to burn to some degree, which will help to restore the health of forests and ecosystems, as well as promote species adaptation and growth. Next, Keith will discuss our vision for the future regarding these wildfires.
Hey y'all, my name is Keith Carney, and I'm going to talk to y'all about our group's vision, or where we would like to be in the next 25 years. For starters, a real example of a vision is a part of the national strategy, which had a 100-year vision which involves the safety and efficiency in putting out fires, and ultimately to be able to live with wildfires as a nation. Once a fire breaks out, though, the number one goal is to keep the firefighters and the public in their surrounding areas safe from harm. This vision promotes a healthier ecosystem, a stronger economy, and a more sustainable society. Now, as a group, we came up with a vision that would be plausible 25 years from now, and our plan has some similarities to the 100-year vision I talked about a minute ago, such as the safety of the firefighters and surrounding communities. In addition to safety, one of our ideas is for improvements to the buildings in fire-prone areas so that they will be less susceptible to damage if a fire were to occur. A few examples of these improvements to these structures would be fire suppression systems, like the sprinklers that are on the insides of the buildings, but put these on the outsides of these structures. Another idea we had was to use construction methods that involved using composite materials, which have more of a resistance to fire or do not burn at all. Now, from an economic standpoint, there would be a property tax as well as insurance payments for people living in these fire-prone areas to help provide financial stability for when a fire were to break out. Now, by implementing this vision, we would be contributing to the sustainability of the spatial region affected by this wicked problem. This would also contribute to a more positive stakeholders perspective, such as creating jobs, which is economical, making the region more biodiverse, which is ecological, and increasing safety, which is social. Now I'm going to turn it over to Patricia, and she's going to talk to y'all about transitions. Thanks.
From here on, we want to have all buildings being constructed be fit with fire prevention and suppression advanced technology. We want to have a 10% reduction in new buildings actually being constructed, and we want to see 5% of existing structures being retrofit with these technologies. We will need new building regulations and policies, and we will need lower taxes as well as subsidies for incentives to have existing buildings retrofit. We also want to have mandatory brush clearing at least once a year. In the following 10 years, we want to have a 30% reduction in the number of buildings being constructed, and we want to have 40% of existing structures being retrofit with these technologies. We also want to increase brush clearing to twice a year. At this point, insurance companies will realize they can charge more for buildings that don't have these technologies, and that in itself is its own incentive. There will be a boom in the area of technology for this because of this. In the following 10 years, we will see a 50% reduction in the total number of buildings being constructed, and 80% of existing structures will be retrofit. At this point, we can charge higher taxes for buildings that are not retrofit or a sin tax. Also, we want to have sustainability education for grade school students so that they can understand the importance of it, as well as prevent any backsliding. A couple of barriers we're going to come across is financial, where we're going to come up with the money, as well as the main one being the human condition, or receiving a smaller reward now as opposed to waiting for a later reward. Howard calls this the hyperbolic discounting. And of course, we're going to come across several natural barriers, such as natural fires. We need to see a fundamental change in the way that we perceive fires. We need to see a paradigm shift from viewing fires as the enemy to viewing them as being beneficial, which they are. We're going to need to use education for this purpose. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and we hope that you learned something. Thank you.